the mighty PlayStation 2. Today I want to talk a little bit about my history with that console, my ongoing experiences with it, and go over my collection of PlayStation 2 games. It is my largest collection, so this will likely be split in two parts. It depends how long it takes, but more than likely two parts, so we'll see when I'm done editing it here. This is actually my original PS2. We have a couple other of the fat and a couple other of the slim models. This one has a lot of issues now these days, but this is my original one with the faceplate missing there off the tray. My brother knocked it out from under the TV. This is my original from 2001 when I got it, and yeah, it's just been such an amazing journey with this console in particular, and I have a huge collection just because of what that system is. I'm the type of collector where, you know, I'm not going to be opening a museum today, you know, anytime soon. I'm not John Hancock, so I don't need, you know, endless massive collections. I'm not someone who can stand. It would actually drive me insane to have a collection the size of like someone like The Last Gamer or even someone like Metal Jesus or whatever. It would drive me nuts because I couldn't have that many games sitting on my shelf that I know I'll never get to. Like, it's just, there's too much. That would drive me insane. So with the sheer number of consoles that I have, there are consoles where I might only have like 10 games, just because I know I'll never get to more games than that on a system with having so many consoles all over the place. But the PlayStation 2, you know, even given those restrictions, I try to play what I want to play, and I'm usually a few years behind on some systems because I'm playing games as I go along and going back. Even with that being said, the PlayStation 2 has been around for so long. It had games for well over a decade coming out for it, and the library is so massive that even, you know, just trying to play what I buy, I have well over 100 games for that console, and there's still a few more that I want to get for it. That's why this is my collection so far, because there's still a few on my list, some Japanese stuff and some things I just haven't picked up yet. But yeah, so going over the collection, this is in no particular order whatsoever. To save space, we actually have the majority of the collection in the walk-in closet in the bedroom, so I'm going to get that out. And first though, I'm going to go through, we did keep one shelf too thick of PS2 games out. Some favorite games, some games that I know I'm likely to play over the next couple of years, you know, while we're still living at this location, so I put just kind of a bunch of favorites and things like that, and I'm going to go over those first. So again, no particular order, I'm going to go over the ones that we've kept out on the shelf first, and then I'm going to dig into the closet and go over the rest of the games for the system. So I made a few piles here, grabbing it off the shelf, and starting with my favorite first-person shooter franchise ever, one that I really hope makes a return, TimeSplitters, the TimeSplitters trilogy. TimeSplitters, the first one here, is the one I've played the most by far, and had so much fun because this was a launch game. This is a game that I rented when the system first came out, and one of the first games that I had for the system, and we just put insane number of hours into this one. Just incredible. The first TimeSplitters, which was a PS2 exclusive. Yeah, we just absolutely loved this game, put so much time into it. Amazing, just kind of arcadey fun and building your own levels, and it was one of the best multiplayer experiences I've ever had, as far as just having, you know, 4 friends together, hours and hours and hours, the way a lot of people did with like Halo and things. It was much more TimeSplitters. Then the one that I think a lot of people remember, and this one I also have on the Xbox, with TimeSplitters 2. This one I think was a step up in many ways, especially with the single-player campaign. The single-player campaign of the first one was much more of just go through each level, almost like an arcade game. This actually put a little bit more into the story and had a little bit more of a lead character and things like that. But TimeSplitters 2, a lot of fun. I ended up playing more, though, of Future Perfect, because I think Future Perfect really stepped up the game as far as compared to number 2, and in every way I think it was probably the overall best in the series, even though I didn't play as much as the original Future Perfect. Another one I think I have on the Xbox, but that is a lot of fun there. Now we have Jak and Daxter, the Precursor Legacy. Jak 2 and 3 I think are over there somewhere else, but Precursor Legacy, by far my favorite of those 3. I liked Jak 1 and Jak 2 and 3, but they were so different in so many ways to this game, and this I felt like was in many ways the successor to things like Mario 64. Mario 64 really showed how you could do a platformer in 3D and make it really work well, and I think that was one thing that the N64 really excelled at. And to me, when I first played this, Jak and Daxter was that for the next generation. That was the next level of what you could do with a 3D platformer, and I absolutely loved it. And I just wasn't into the little bit of a change in tone and the integration of weapons and things like that in 2 and 3. Still like them, but I really wish that we would have another game in the series like this. A couple other earlier games on the system: Shadow of Destiny, which I think is called Shadow of Memories in Europe, This is a fantastic game that I think is a very underrated thing that you can also get on PSP. It's also put on there with a little bit of additional content, but I just loved the gameplay in this and solving all the puzzles and going back and forth through time in this one town. Very interesting experience, another early game that was fantastic. And moving on to Summoner, I really loved having this sort of PC-style RPG on the systems, particularly early on. This was a lot of fun. I loved even just a little bit of extra content, like the D&D joke in there is pretty cool. This was a very good game. And then in some ways they made Summoner 2 a little bit better as far as a console experience. They took it a little bit away from its PC roots. It's still very much of that style of game, but it's a little bit different compared to 1. I think overall I like 1 a little bit better, but I have to say that they did do some pretty significant improvements with 2, and then that's also on the GameCube. It was put on there, I think, as Summoner Reborn, something along those lines. Eternal Ring, this is actually one of the first games I ever reviewed on the channel. I think it might even be the first one I ever did on the channel, about, what, 3.5 years ago at this point? Yeah, this is just, it's a fun spin-off to the Kingsfield series. Definitely a great game. I really still enjoy this one to this day. That's why it's still out there. One that I saw being talked about on Twitter about a week ago for some reason. Maybe it was the anniversary or something along those lines, but The Bouncer. This is great. The Bouncer is a lot of fun. It is a game that didn't live up to its expectations, though. I think the expectations for what it was going to be and were set very, very high, and a lot of things that Square talked about, having definitely greater item usage integration and more sort of like our RPG elements to it, and having co-op through the entire storyline. A lot of those things were scrapped, and I feel like if we hadn't had all those promises come forward from Square before this came out, this would have been better received. I think just that this is a shadow of what we were expecting, and I think it let a lot of people down. But it's the kind of game where, you know, a lot of people complain you can beat it in like an hour and a half, 2 hours, but you're supposed to play through it many, many times and then unlock stuff and then do the arena battling with your friends. And there's actually a lot of content in here, a lot more than people give it credit for, just because you can beat it one time in single player in like under 2 hours. That's not the end of the game, as you're just getting started at that point. This is still a lot of fun. I think definitely an underrated game, and one where I really wish we had a sequel, because all those unfulfilled promises for that game could have been put in a sequel, and we could have really, like, I think The Bouncer 2 would have been remarkable. This is a flawed gem for the PS2, The Bouncer. I think The Bouncer 2 could have been amazing, but that's never going to happen, sadly. One that is not as good as its original, but still a decent game, we have Legaia 2 Dual Saga. The Legend of Legaia on PS1 is one of my favorite RPGs on that system. It's one of my favorite, especially non-Squaresoft RPGs. It's one of my favorite turn-based combat systems ever. I absolutely love that. And this continues much in the same style as the first game, but I don't think, for me, I feel like the art direction really toned down the colors a bit. Everything feels a little more subdued, a little more dull, and it just is not as visually attractive as the first game. And I think the soundtrack in many ways has a very similar effect, and I wasn't quite as into the characters and story as the first game, but I think that is a little more personal taste rather than quality. But, you know, definitely does not live up quite to the first game, but I think is one that you should check out. It seems to be still fairly cheap, especially as far as an RPG goes on the PS2. A lot of those I feel like have been starting to climb now as they're becoming more and more like almost retro. They're getting old enough that they're getting there. I think this one still stays pretty cheap, and I don't think a lot of people have played this. So if you have played the first game and you have not checked this out, it's worth checking out as a sequel. Just don't expect it to be quite as good as the first. Yu Yu Hakusho Dark Tournament. We've been kind of gypped on Yu Yu Hakusho games here in the US. There are a bunch in Japan. I have one on the Super Famicom. It's really good as far as a fighting game. This one is not so great. Amanda likes it more than I do. It can be fun and it's cool just because if you really are a big fan of the anime, it's cool to at least have a really good fighting game, because the only other Yu Yu Hakusho games that we got in North America were both on the Game Boy Advance. And this one, of the three, might be my favorite, even though it's really not that great, but it is fun to relive Dark Tournament. It's an okay anime fighting game. It just pales in comparison to even the early Budokai games. I'd say are better than that, and those aren't without their issues. So that one. Another one that I think you should really check out, it's actually kind of cool, Orphan. This is based off the manga. See, well, I think it started as a novel, like light novels, and then the manga, and then the anime. I think it was in that order. We have a few volumes of the manga. We have the complete collection of the anime. I remember watching that when it was first coming out over here. Ann and I both really liked that. Asali, We've enjoyed watching that, and this was a fun early game because this came out in the US around the same time as my friend Matt and I started watching the anime, and I think he had this too. But it has a really fun system. You go around and explore the environments and solve traps and things like that. Nothing too elaborate, but just enough to keep your interest and keep you involved, and definitely one where I think if you're a fan of either the manga or the anime in particular, you're going to get much more enjoyment out of this than if you're going into it blind, because I feel like otherwise there isn't really enough of a explanation of the characters, I feel like, going in blind. But the battle system is actually a lot of fun, the different magic system. It's one where it could have been a little more elaborate, a little more in-depth, a little more customization would have been great, but for what it is, this is actually a pretty decent tie-in game to the anime, particularly for that early in the lifespan, so it's one to check out. If you have seen the anime, haven't played that, it's worth checking out. Arc the Lad, this is the second generation of Arc the Lad. You have Arc the Lad, Twilight of Spirits, and End of Darkness. So Twilight of Spirits, I did really enjoy. It is very different from the PS1 games. I love that trilogy on PS1. I think that's right behind me here on the shelf sitting there. Absolutely adore those. These keep much of the gameplay and then really just sort of evolve it beyond the basic grid system, but I actually don't think it worked quite as well, and just everything about this is good. It's decent, but I don't think it quite lives up to the previous three on the PS1. Those are just instant classics, but this is a fairly decent RPG for the system, one I enjoyed and I thought was still a worthy successor to that original trilogy. I definitely liked that and was hoping for a bright future for Arc the Lad, because I really like Arc the Lad. Didn't quite happen. The last game in the series, the only other one aside from the game of the Wonder Swan, which I've never played, Arc the Lad, End of Darkness, it tried to be, I think, it barely stands as its own game. It's really not very good, but I think it tried to be a love letter to people who played the previous games, who played the previous 4 and Monster Arena, and there's the one in the Wonder Swan, things like that. You have all the bunch of different characters in some form or another throughout here, and there's online deathmatch, and it really tried to be more of a celebration of the series rather than a great standalone game, and it was just kind of okay. It really was a sad end to the series. It's just kind of okay. I admit I did get into this nostalgic fan factor of it when I first played it. That was the one thing that kept me playing it, but it's really one that I can't see myself, maybe I'll replay someday, but it's just not a great way to end the series. It's kind of sad, but I'd like to have, just because I really enjoyed that series, and that is the end of it. One that it was a big surprise to me when I first played it, the PS2 port of Half-Life here, with Half-Life DK, the co-op thing here. I actually, over the years, I played Half-Life originally on Windows 95. I really, really enjoyed that. The first time I experienced it was my friend Zach's older brother, Nick, was playing that like crazy, obsessively, and I played that over at their house, really enjoyed it. Over the years, I actually prefer this version, which is crazy, and it's sacrilegious compared to, and you can use the keyboard and mouse in this version, but to say oh my gosh, I like that better than the PC version. Going back to all the different versions, this is actually my favorite version of the original Half-Life. I just find it to be the most overall polished, enjoyable experience. I just really like that version. For some reason, it has just clicked with me in some way, and if I want to replay Half-Life, which I've done a couple times, probably my favorite single-player campaign in a first-person shooter still, even more than Half-Life 2, I will go back and play that version. One of the most played games, along with TimeSplitters and Tekken Tag Tournament when we first got the PlayStation, was the original SSX. Really loved this. This was kind of coming out right on the heels of having tons of fun with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 for skateboarding. Then this really took snowboarding finally to that level. I've always enjoyed things like cool borders and stuff like that, but it was never quite as enjoyable and fun to play with friends for me as something like Tony Hawk was for skateboarding. But SSX, amazing. And then one of my 2 copies, the other one is in the closet somewhere, 2 copies of SSX Tricky. I have a black label somewhere and the greatest hits just sitting out here. But yeah, this just took things to a whole new level, took everything that was in SSX and just improved every element of it, added so much personality to it. This is still my favorite snowboarding game ever, and one of my favorite multiplayer games ever. I play this at least once a year. I break it out, whether it's just do a run with a character or play with some friends for a couple of hours, this gets played at least once a year, and that's why it's sitting out there, because I love that game. 3 and the rest of the series is still pretty good since then, but nothing has ever touched Tricky in my mind. Now moving on to the Tekkens, the other one I mentioned as being the one I put tons of time in when we first got the system, Tekken Tag Tournament. Still my favorite Tekken game to this day. Tekken 3 was my favorite, and this is really Tekken 3 Plus. This is Tekken 3 Super version. That's what Tekken Tag Tournament is for the PS2. This is still my favorite fighting game ever. Tekken 4, a game that made a lot of changes in many ways to the feel of the gameplay, and I think was a bit of a black sheep now. I think I remember a lot of people not liking this quite as much as some of the changes, and some people were really enjoying it. It was hit or miss for people. I really liked it. I do prefer, though, Tekken 5 overall. This was really great. Kind of, for me, send off to the series, because I have not really been in Tekken since then. I've not tried 7. I really didn't like Tekken 6 that much. It just didn't. I remember we got it for I think it was for 360 we played it, and played it with a whole bunch of friends. We had like 5 or 6 people over, we just got it, and we played it for a few hours that night, and we just weren't feeling it. It just wasn't the same way. Like eventually I think we put in either Tekken Tag Tournament or Tekken 5 like the next morning, because we just weren't feeling Tekken 6. And yeah, so, and what was it, Dark Resurrection on the PSP? I forgot that one was, but I don't really like fighting games on handhelds. But overall, I just haven't been in Tekken, which is one of my favorite fighting series, since 5. 5 was a great send-off for me, and I love the extras in here. If you're a fan of Namco, and particularly the Tekken series, there's a lot of sort of Namco history things in here, and you can go back and play the arcade versions of Tekken 1, 2, and 3, so that's really cool to have on one disc. So, and even things like the Tekken Devil Within, the little bonus game thing here, that was okay, but it was a fun little extra, so this is great, and it still looks fantastic, you know, on really good TV. Tekken 5 still looks pretty darn good. Speaking of games that still look fantastic and sound fantastic and are incredible and desperately need to have an HD collection, that's my most wanted HD collection on, I don't care, put on PS4, I prefer a cool Switch collection, but a really cool HD collection on PS4. Xenosaga, give me the Xenosaga trilogy. These games are great, particularly now the Xeno franchise as a whole through the Blade games has really reached a new level of popularity. I really hope people get a chance to go back and experience these through a collection. I feel like that's really good. That's been happening now with some older games. But Episode 1, there's Black Label and greatest hits of that. Yeah, these are amazing games. This really, really blew me away. I remember playing Final Fantasy X and Xenosaga Episode 1 in the same year, and going in fully expecting Final Fantasy X to be my preferred game of the year, but this beat it out. This was like, wow, this really knocked my socks off. That was an amazing game. Probably one of the most disappointing sequels ever for me. I still really like it, though. I mean, this just, the first Xenosaga is in my top 10 of all time, and this is nowhere near it. It's still in my top 200. Still a really good game. Story-wise, I really enjoyed it. So many of the changes to it, though, have just felt like complete downgrades. It felt like a lesser production on almost every front. Episode 2. Episode 3 fixed a lot. Episode 3 is a fantastic game. A really worthy end to that trilogy. I wish we got in the full 6 games, but still, for having these 3, there's enough of a conclusion, enough of a wrap-up to this story, and really, you know, fitting that this first trilogy got a great ending to it. So, amazing games that I think really need a re-release. Does anyone remember the iToy? The only iToy game I really wanted because of all the Sega-themed minigames and licensing. Sega Superstars for the iToy. This is, you know, iToy is a really cheesy, doesn't work so well device, but yeah, that is the one thing that I really wanted for it. One, I'm going to put this in a separate pile because one of the few games here that I've not played through, one of the few that's sitting on my backlog, but Stella Deus, The Gate of Eternity, I played a little bit of it, and I don't remember why I had to stop playing it. For some reason, but one that I've yet to go through and finish. It seems like a really good strategy game from what I've played, so this one is one that's on the backlog that I need to get to someday. A lot of fun. Anything that Alice publishes, I'm at least going to take a look at. But Nobunaga's Ambition, Rise to Power, this is a really great series, but it is such a time investment, and there's just so much going on to really get into it that I've played this through one time, and someday I want to come back to it, and I've not played any of the others in the series, but this one I really enjoyed what I played, and it's something that very different, I think really works well, and I definitely understand why it's been such an ongoing series. I could see myself getting really sucked into other entries in that series, so that's a great one there. Warhammer 40k Fire Warrior. And I played a bit of Warhammer back in the day. I was definitely much more of a D&D person, but this seemed interesting to me and is something a little bit different. And I like how they did it as a first-person shooter. I think that really worked well for the story they were trying to tell in the environment. And this was actually pretty decent. I think that this was one that's not perfect, but I think is one that I think more people should check out if you are a fan of first-person shooters from this era. We have both the Phantasy Star universe games here, which not that great, but it is interesting as an online experience, definitely. I do like, though, one thing I really like about these is you can go on and play through certain chapters of the story and enough to make it enough of enough meat for like an okay RPG in on offline mode. That's one thing I've always liked about Phantasy Star that I wish more MMOs had available, especially when servers eventually go dead. If there aren't, fan servers and things like that, they're just kind of gone forever. And with the Phantasy Star games, the online games, there's at least something there, even when the online goes dead. So it's cool to play those. Again, the single-player experience isn't anything spectacular, but it is kind of fun and can give you a taste of what it would have been like. One that I think is surprisingly funny. This is a funny game. I really like the series. So Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law, is very much just like a point-and-click adventure. It's like it's an Ace Attorney basically, but Harvey Birdman, and it's just funny, especially if you are a fan of old Hanna-Barbera. I love Hanna-Barbera stuff, and I really like the Harvey Birdman TV series, Cartoon Network. I remember watching on Adult Swim a lot, and really preferring that even to things like Aqua Teen Hunger Force and Sea Lab, and this was my thing. Harvey Birdman was my favorite of all those, and this really, really is the humor of the show in game form. A lot of fun. Kingsfield: The Ancient City, great RPG in that series. Probably, I think, the one that is, can't really call any of those games accessible, unless you're counting spin-offs like Eternal Ring, but as far as the main series goes, that is accessible, and one that I think if you are a big fan of the Dark Souls and all that stuff from Software recently, maybe this should be one you check out. So it's sort of the granddaddy of what those games would be. The Shin Megami Tensei games here, we have Devil Summoner 2. Do not have a copy of 1. I've not been able to find a copy of 1. I've legitimately never ever physically seen in person a copy of 1. And that is why this is, I've played a little bit of it, but then I put it down because I wanted to wait and play 1 first. I've never found 1. I've literally never found it. Someday I'll have to go online and get it because I have never found it. But yeah, so Devil Summoner 2. Some that are just an amazing duology. This is another one that I feel like should get a re-release. Would really be cool on the Switch, because I think people need to play these. But digital, I think it's Digital Avatar Tuner in Japan, but Digital Devil Saga 1 and 2. These are fantastic. These would be great for a re-release for people to go back to. Then of course Persona 3 and 4. Amazing games. Just incredible. 4 has been, milked to death, I think, and they're probably going to keep doing that with 5. I can kind of see that. 3, I think, needs to have a little more love. I really actually prefer 3 over 4. I would love to see a port of this to the Switch, or like a remaster, because you have, for Persona 4, you got Gold on the Vita, which is kind of an upgrade, and Persona 3 Portable, though, is a bit of a downgrade. I do like that you can have the choice of the female protagonist. I do like some additions to the way it works, but you're also missing a lot in it. You can't really explore the environments as freely. It feels a little bit less immersive. It's a little bit more visual novel-esque, the experience on the Persona 3 Portable. So I enjoyed playing through that, but I definitely prefer the main console version. I feel like it needs a cool upgraded version the way Persona 4 got. And then, of course, my favorite dungeon crawler ever, just amazing game, and there are rumors that this could be getting a remaster for the Switch. It's still a rumor at this point, but that would be cool because people need to play this. People need to play Nocturne, SMT3. This is incredible. Just an amazing game. Stylistically, it is extraordinary. It's just an amazing piece of art and such a fun experience. Some of the Final Fantasies elsewhere, but here's 12, regular copy there, and the skill case with the bonus DVD there. Final Fantasy 12, amazing game, one that I didn't like quite as much when I first started playing it, but when I really got into it, and especially when I replayed it a second time, I really got into the world of Ivalice and really got into the story and the characters and just the exploration of the world. It reminds me a lot of the way something like Rogue Galaxy is set up, or even Xenoblade Chronicles, things like that. I really have enjoyed, even on recurring playthroughs of that game, Final Fantasy XII, the Shadow Hearts trilogy. Two really decent game, pretty good game, amazing game, and pretty okay game. But overall, a great trilogy that you should pick up. Second one, Covenant, is definitely the best there. So there's some Tales games here. Tales of Legendia, one that I've reviewed on the channel there, and another one that I've also reviewed, my favorite game in the Tales series. Haven't played anything that comes close to it. Tales of the Abyss, which we also have on 3DS. And of course the remaster slash remake of Crash Team Racing is coming out, and the second game was also really good, Nitro Kart. I wasn't as big of a fan, I have it somewhere, of the third game. I liked it, but this was a great successor, especially because it's not Naughty Dog. They really still pulled it off. Nitro Kart, still a lot of fun. I think it needed to do a little bit more as far as a little more originality with some of the tracks. It's a little bit more like Crash Team Racing 1.5, but it was enough that the game was so great that something a little bit different and a little bit more was awesome on the PS2. Next up is we just have kind of a stack of maybe about I think 14 loose disc games that were ones we picked up when GameStop was phasing out the PS2, and they had a really good sale, and not something I normally do, but they were, I forget how much they were, but I remember it was like a really good deal just to grab a whole bunch there, and they're games that I have complete copies of all of them now, with the exception of I have not been able to find a really nice copy of Klonoa 2, so just have the loose disc for that one. We don't want to get a copy of that because it's a great game. But yeah, just some extra ones there. Some Tomb Raiders, Tomb Raider Legend, which I have on, I don't even know how many other things, but Tomb Raider Legend, that was released on a lot of things. Anniversary, and Underworld. We have a bunch of different demo discs, things like the Jam Pack. I just grabbed one of those up here. I really like those. Some of those had some really interesting, not just demos, but also like little background videos and cool things. It's fun to go back and look, and sometimes maybe see the difference between the demo or the video preview and the final product. That can be kind of cool depending on what the game is. Jak 2 and 3. Yeah, remember those were over there somewhere. Still really good games, but ones that I don't come back to the way I do Jak and Daxter, the first one. I really, I liked them, but wasn't thrilled with the big change. They felt like they were trying to be more Ratchet and Clank, and I know those studios are worth working very closely. We have, where's the first one here? Well, there's Drakengard 2. Drakengard 1 is somewhere in that shelf there. Rogue Galaxy, level 5 is always great, and I think this is a fantastic game there. Unreal Tournament, which I prefer the Dreamcast release of this, but having a PS2 is still fun. And Red Faction, I remember really enjoying destroying the environments and things like that, and really enjoying the Martian storyline, especially the first one. I think we played a lot too. I played through single player. I don't remember if we ever played multiplayer on 2. I think it was more just 1. But those were great games. Soul Calibur 2, fantastic game, just a really great fighter. And I remember so many people got so suckered into, including myself, getting a version of the game for every system that you owned, and a handful of us owned all 3, PS2, GameCube, and Xbox, and I have all 3 copies. I have, because the extra character in each one, but it was a good enough game, we played so much of each version that it was worth having all 3, and just even having that extra character and really fitting. And Spawn was cool in the Xbox, and of course, Link on the GameCube, and Heihachi here is a big fan of Tekken. This is my version that I picked up first. I think overall we probably played the GameCube one the most, but yeah, fantastic game there. Kessen 1 and 2, these were really cool. Played a lot of these. Kessen 3 I really didn't like as much as these first 2, but overall fantastic games. 2 was a big improvement, I think, over 1, even though I enjoyed the setting a little bit more of 1. Overall, these were really cool, and it really made the strategy genre work very well on console without the need of mouse support, because that's always been, especially at this time, previous generation, a lot of games either had mouse support, luckily, on something like the PS1, or didn't have any support whatsoever, and made it very clunky and hard, and they were just sort of PC ports of things like Warcraft and StarCraft, Command & Conquer, and things like that on console, and they were always a little different, but these really had a formula that made that type of game work very well. It was a lot of fun. Grandia 3. Gotta love these. Kuzo 1 and 2. Ring of Red. I actually have another copy of this somewhere too. This is the one I have a double of, because this is, I like strategy games, I like mechs, and I really love the tone of this. What was I playing? The demo for Valkyria Chronicles 4. I was playing, and tonally it reminded me of this in so many different ways. And this is very different gameplay wise, but there's a lot in there that really reminded me of Ring of Red for some reason. Brought back memories of that. Beyond Good and Evil, great game. I have this on Xbox as well, I believe. And yeah, not GameCube, Xbox. I have it. And great game. The sequel, I remember being very excited when it was first shown off. It wasn't really, it was just kind of a CGI trailer at E3, and as more and more information is coming out, it feels like it's going to be a little too focused on the online element, and I just don't think it's going to be the sequel that I'd want for that. So still, at least we have that, and that's cool. Time Crisis 3. Time Crisis is a great series, probably second only to House of the Dead as far as my favorite on-rail shooters and arcades. Love them. I love, the first one I remember playing a lot with like the foot pedal and really getting into that. Stars Until the End of Time. I have just a regular greatest hits version here, and then the collector's box. Really enjoyed this. This is one that I think is more of a little bit of a love-hate one. I know some people this is their favorite, some people it's their least favorite in the series. Even when it came out, I remember seeing, here's what the case looks like then. I remember seeing reviews giving it anywhere from like 2 to 3 out of 5 to some giving it 9 out of 10. It was just kind of all over the place, and I don't know, for me it's still my favorite. I like it even more than 2, yes. I really enjoyed 1 and 2, and haven't really enjoyed any of the newer ones, but this one, just for some reason, I really loved. Shadow of the Colossus. Another box here of Dragon Quest VIII. Still, by far my favorite Dragon Quest game. I think Level 5 really nailed it, and I think it's even done a better job than, of course, the parent company. So they just did an incredible job. Manual. This comes with the demo for FF12. Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, Baldur's Gate Diablo style. This was really cool. We had a lot of fun playing this multiplayer. Really, I think, in many ways nailed the feel of Dungeons & Dragons and the feel of Baldur's Gate, having played those, enjoyed those on the PC, and really did a good job of putting them into this more kind of Diablo, hack and slash gameplay style, and it was just a lot of fun. Of course, repetitive, that's just the style of the game, and I didn't get too much into any of the successors. I played a little bit of 2, played a little bit of the other like spin-offs that they had and things like that were the same style, but this is the one that really stuck out to me and the one I've replayed. Speaking of repetitive, Dynasty Warriors 2. This is a fun series. Dynasty Warriors, this is the one I've played the most just because it was the first one I played of this style, and I think the first one was actually just like a one-on-one fighting game on PS1. I never played it, but I think it was the first one that really was that Dynasty Warriors style now that we all know and love and hate. But actually I'm more interested in the ones where they take a theme from something else, like Zelda or the Gundam. They've done a bunch of Gundam ones, like any of those kind of themed ones there. I think those are kind of a little more interesting to me, so I like those more than just the regular ones. Gungrave Overdose, the original one somewhere there is the sequel, Gungrave Overdose. Virtua Fighter 4. This is the Evolution version of Virtua Fighter 4. I had the original somewhere too. Kinetica. Galarian's Ash. Twisted Metal Black, still my favorite Twisted Metal. Risk, Global Domination. I also have Risk on the Genesis, and that's pretty cool, and as a board game I always liked, but this is actually overall my preferred version. My brother and I played that a bunch of times. Some of the Legacy of Kain games here. We have Blood Omen 2, Soul Reaver 2, and of course Defiance. And then Okagi Shadow King. This is very, very interesting, quirky RPG, a lot of fun. So that's the end of all the games that we had, out on these shelves. And now I'm going to go dig into the closet, and this will, I guess, be the point where I break this video into 2, because it's going to be going on for a while. So I'm going to go break out the boxes from the closet, and we will continue.